The morning the world changed for Adeel began with a single, unexpected tremor in his chest, a strange tightening that didn't last long but left behind a fear he couldn't explain. It wasn't pain exactly, but it felt like a warning, like the quiet flicker of a candle just before the flame bends in the wind. He sat alone on the edge of his bed, feeling a heaviness in the air around him. The room looked the same as always, sunlight pressing through the curtains, dust drifting lazily, but something inside him felt undeniably different. It was as if his life, which had always rushed forward without pause, had suddenly stopped in the middle of an unwritten sentence. And in that stillness, he realized how much he had ignored his body, his stress, his habits, and how fragile life truly was. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything. Adeel was only 28, but he lived as though his body would forgive anything. Days spent skipping breakfast, surviving on fast food, working into late nights, scrolling endlessly instead of sleeping, and moving through life with the quiet belief that, later, was a promise he could rely on. He had always thought fear belonged to older people, those who carried pills in their pockets and walked carefully on stairs. But now, as he sat there gripping the side of his bed, breathing in slow shaky breaths just to feel normal again, he sensed the truth creeping in. Illness didn't wait for age, and the body remembered every careless choice. His mother had warned him gently through the years, urging him to drink more water, to sleep early, to stop eating on the run. But he brushed it away, convinced that fatigue was just the price of ambition. What he didn't realize was that small habits carried power, power to save, or power to destroy, hidden inside choices so ordinary they were invisible. The tightening in his chest faded after a few minutes, but it left behind a fear that clung to him all day like a silent shadow. At work, he kept touching his chest, hoping it was nothing. At lunch, he couldn't bring himself to eat. And by the time he reached home that night, he felt a weight pressing on him, not from illness but from regret. He decided to visit the clinic the next morning. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant, and the pale walls made everything feel colder than it should. He sat with his hands clasped, tapping his foot against the floor, telling himself it was probably nothing. Just stress, maybe. But deep down he knew it was more than that. When his name was finally called, his heartbeat thudded so hard he felt it in his throat. The doctor, calm and experienced, listened patiently as Adeel explained the episode, the fatigue, the late nights, the way his head felt heavy every morning. After a careful checkup, the doctor leaned back and spoke with a softness that somehow felt heavier than anger. He wasn't critically ill, but he was headed toward danger. His blood pressure was high for his age. His sleep patterns were damaging his immune system. His diet was pushing him into inflammation, and his stress level was carving invisible cracks across his health. Nothing had broken yet, but everything was wearing thin. It was like being told that the bridge you walk across every day hadn't collapsed, but it had started to rot. Adeel went home in silence that day, walking slowly, listening to his own breath as though hearing it for the first time. Every step felt like a question. Why had he waited this long to care? Why was he always promising himself that he would start next week? Why did it take fear to make him acknowledge the gift of being alive? He sat in his quiet room again, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't frightening, it was humbling. Over the next few days, he began making small changes, almost shyly. He started drinking more water, not because he felt thirsty but because he knew his body needed it. He stepped outside for a walk in the early morning, when the world felt peaceful and the sky held a soft pale light that made everything feel new. He cut down sugar, started eating fruits, and slept a little earlier each night. None of it came easy. He had to fight his old habits, old cravings, and old excuses. There were mornings he woke up groggy and annoyed, nights he wanted to stay up late, and moments he felt overwhelmed by how far he had let himself fall. But slowly, the fog in his mind began to lift. His breathing felt steadier. His heartbeat calmed. His energy, once drained and scattered, began returning gently, like birds finding their way back to a long-forgotten window. And as his body healed in small quiet ways, something else healed too, his appreciation for life. He realized that disease prevention wasn't about fear. It wasn't about avoiding sickness. It was about respecting the life he had been given, honoring the moments he still had, and protecting the people who loved him from the pain of watching him suffer. There was a day, 3 weeks into his new routine, when something profound happened. He was sitting outside on a park bench after finishing a slow jog. The sky was warming with color, soft oranges pushing through the blue. People walked dogs, children laughed in the distance, the world hummed with morning energy. And Adeel felt alive. Not just awake, but deeply present. He inhaled fresh air with a gratefulness that surprised him. He realized he had spent years breathing without noticing, moving without feeling, living without appreciating. Now, every heartbeat felt precious. He began researching more about daily prevention, simple, smart habits that didn't require money or equipment, just intention. Washing hands regularly, keeping a clean environment, avoiding unnecessary junk food, staying hydrated, taking short breaks during work, stretching, resting, staying mindful of stress. They were not dramatic steps. They were ordinary, but they held the power to protect. He wished someone had told him years earlier that disease prevention wasn't a complicated science. It was a gentle daily practice, a silent promise to take care of oneself. One evening, after months of steady effort, Adeel visited his mother. When she opened the door, she paused, studying him with quiet surprise. He looked healthier, brighter eyes, calmer expression, steadier posture. She didn't ask what had changed, she simply smiled with a relief only a mother could feel. And as they sat together, he realized something important: taking care of himself wasn't just for him. It was for the people who loved him, the people who would worry, grieve, or carry the weight of his choices. Preventing disease was an act of kindness, one that extended beyond his own body. Still, life wasn't perfect. There were days he slipped, evenings he felt tired, moments he longed for old habits. But each time he drifted off track, he remembered that morning tremor, the moment fear cracked open his blind assumptions, and it guided him back. He learned that change wasn't a straight line but a slow upward climb. Some days felt easy, others required courage, but each small step mattered. Months later, Adeel stood at his window during a quiet sunset. The sky spilled gold and lavender across the horizon. Birds glided in slow circles. And he felt a calmness he hadn't known since childhood. It wasn't the absence of worry, it was the confidence of someone who had learned to care, to protect, to listen to the quiet signals of the body. He realized then that he had not just avoided illness, he had built a life that allowed him to breathe freely, move confidently, and live with purpose. He hadn't become perfect, he hadn't become a health expert, but he had become someone who chose himself, someone who understood that prevention was not a rule, but a gift. And maybe that was the biggest victory of all. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support encourages stories that inspire healing, hope, and second chances. Special request: before you go, please comment, "I choose healthy habits," to show your commitment and to inspire others. Adeel's journey is a reminder that life does not wait for the perfect moment. The body does not pause while we chase distractions. Health is quiet, gentle, and easily overlooked, until the moment it trembles. But choosing better habits today can rewrite the future in ways we never expect. Prevention is not about fear, it is about love, for ourselves, for our families, and for the life we are still learning to protect. And so, as the night settled outside his window and the world softened into darkness, Adeel whispered a silent promise to himself: to keep walking, keep caring, and keep choosing the small, smart habits that kept him alive, not just in body, but in spirit.